Well, good evening. I'm George Offerman, and I have the distinct pleasure of bringing to you a gentleman that I have met about 7 years ago. A very stalwart man who is very strong in his Christian and Catholic beliefs. He has been there, rain and shine, heat, snow, never melted, at the abortion mill in Falls Church. His name is Dr. Robert Kling. Now, Doctor, it's been really an honor to work with you all these years. I am thrilled I got to know you, and I can't say enough that, now that you're hiking off to the wild blue waters instead of yonder in the next couple of days, you're going to be very, very well missed. But what I'd like for you to do tonight is tell really a lot about your personal history and how you got going and the role of faith in all these things.
Well, I won't present this as the ultimate success story because I'm not yet an ultimate success. But I did have a few successes in life. I had a very good time, for one thing. I had a lot of good times. And I met a lot of very interesting people. And I interacted with a lot of very interesting people. I even had occasion, now and then, to interact with some very influential people. And I earnestly hope and pray that the interaction was favorable as far as the world is concerned. In some cases, believe it or not, I think that was true. I started out as a very young person. Most people do, now that I think of it. I started out as somebody so young that many people now wouldn't even consider me a person, but I was. And we were rather poor, so I didn't grow awfully fast, but I grew. And the Bible refers to a young man who grew in wisdom and in grace. Well, I didn't grow in wisdom for a long time, and I still haven't grown in grace. Still reasonably awkward. But I have lived a long time. I've lived 86 years. Most of those years were pretty happy years. Not very wealthy years most of the time. At one time I was wealthy, believe it or not. It didn't last. It wasn't all that much fun. I don't regret it a lot, leaving. But after a childhood in the Depression, and I mean the Big Depression, during which time everybody was poor, at least everybody I knew. And in that very poor neighborhood, my family was considered rich. And the criteria used for determining who was rich will give you a bit of a laugh. My family had a telephone. We were the only family within 5 blocks one way, 2.5 blocks the other way, 2 blocks the other way, and 4 blocks west. We were the only family with a telephone. So understandably, we were thought to be rich. Along with being rich and having the only telephone came some responsibilities. And when we were little kids, it was not uncommon for the phone to ring at 6:30 and somebody would say, "Would you go call J.D. to the phone?" They assumed we knew who J.D. was. I did. It was J.D. Mayhill. He lived only 1 block south of us. So we put our shoes on and tramped a block. "J.D., you're wanted on the telephone." He would come over and use the phone and thank us and go back home. And we would get such messages about every day. So we were able to perform a service for our neighbors. We also were the only people in that neighborhood who had a refrigerator. Now, I use the word refrigerator in its broadest sense. It means an ice box, an insulated box into which we put 25 pounds of ice 5 mornings a week. Many neighbors did not have that. And many of those neighbors were poor people. My mother operated a grocery store. That's why we had these wonderful inventions in our place. It was not uncommon for a housewife to come shopping for meat and milk at 6 in the morning so she could make breakfast for her children or for her husband who was about to go off to work. She'd come in again at noon and make another small purchase. She'd come in again at 5 and make another small purchase. Sometimes, even though her purchases were small, she bought more than they ate at that meal. And she might come back and say, "Mrs. Kling, would you please put this back in your refrigerator till this evening?" And my mother would. And we had leftovers from 6, 8, 10, 12 families in our refrigerator. I suspect now some inspector from some agency would consider that an undesirable arrangement. But we did. And of course they always came back before the next meal. So those people were not rich, and we were considered rich. Rich meant having a telephone and having a refrigerator. We had other wealth. Since my mother operated a grocery store, we always knew that we would have food for the next meal. There was never any question in our minds. It wasn't always filet mignon. It was almost never champagne. But it was good, wholesome food, meat and taters and vegetables, and we ate all right. We grew. I went to a school which was undeniably the best academically in our community. It had 4 rooms in it. The first room was for the 1st and 2nd grade. The second room was for the 3rd and 4th grade. Third room held the 5th and 6th, and the 4th room held the really big people, the 7th and 8th graders. Having 2 grades in one room sounds like a great distraction, and I suppose it was. But we who were in the 3rd grade knew some of the words that 4th graders used. And when we heard the term fraction, we had heard the word before. And we remembered what some of our older schoolmates had done with fractions, and so we were a little more familiar than we would have been. Yes, one teacher taught all subjects: reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, everything. Again, you may ask, was she sufficiently educated in all the specialties? Well, evidently she was, because whenever there was any intramural competition, students from our school always made out very well. In fact, we often were not invited to participate in such events. I remember at the near the end of our 8th grade,